Today we'll wrap up where we left off last time. Okay, we'll pick up where we left off last time, and we'll continue with a new chapter, a new topic today. Okay, so last time we looked at 5 dimensions. Remember, we have been talking about speech and thought representation for some time, and last time we looked at 5 dimensions, right? 5 dimensions of speech or thought representation, and we look at 5 factors in particular, right? So starting from voice, from the message, the signal, the attitude, and the purpose, right? So that's what we talked about last time. So, so when we talk about voice, for example, whose voice is it, right? Is it yourself or others, and so on, right? Is it your voice? Are you quoting yourself? Are you talking about your thought? Or are you talking about other people's words or thought, and so on? If it's other, is it like specified or not specified? Or if it's community, voice, and so on, right? So we talked about that last time. And then the message also, what type of message is presented? Is it direct speech? Is it indirect speech? Is it a mixed type? And so on, right? So direct, indirect, and then the mixed type, and so on. Okay. And then the signal. How do you know that you have speech representation? How do you know? There must be a word that signals it, right? In most cases, that would be words that are in the main clause or in the subordinate clause, or no word, but it's mixed in, it's fused within the main clause, and so on. So we talked about the signal, right? So the thing that start off, right? So it's the thing that starts off the message, okay? And then the attitude, we talked about whether the reporter agrees with it or not, positive, negative, or neutral, right? And then for the purpose, which might be the most difficult one, because you have to look at that in context, right? When we talk about the purpose, we could perhaps talk about two major types, like narrative type. So you use the he said, she said, they said reported speech in order to tell the story, right? To drive the story along, right? Who said what, and then what happened afterwards, and so on, right? So that's the narrative type for the narrative purposes. But then for non-narrative purposes, you could have things like you can use reported speech in order to support a statement, or in order to undermine the statement, right? And so on. So that's what we looked at last time. So, and we looked at one piece of writing in particular. So that is a piece of writing that has to do with the kind of the strategy, right? The strategy that Korean students are taking or have been taking in order to look better when they apply for jobs, and so on, right? So I believe that we didn't finish this one, that one. So let's take care of that before we move on. So I believe that this is where we are. So we are around paragraph 13, right? So we are around paragraph 13. So paragraph 13 is a different topic, right? Because meaning like in 10, 11, and 12, these paragraphs talk about the Ministry of Education, right? And their decision. So number 13 is a different topic, right? So it talks about, the topic has to do about SNU, meaning Seoul National University, and what they did, right? So this is a new topic. It says, the SNU introduced a plan that restricts professors from giving out A+ grades to students retaking classes effective from 2015, meaning that they cannot, for students retaking the classes, they cannot get A+. Maybe the max that they would get is an A, which is like here, right? Which is like here. So an SNU official said that, so now you have a reported speech there, right? Here, For the first one, SNU official said that. So you have the source is an SNU official, right? So the source is there. So that's the source of the message. And the message itself is what we call the indirect or the paraphrase, right? Indirect or paraphrase. And the signal is easy. The signal that tells you, oh, this is the start of the reported speech is the word said, which is the main clause, right? So this is the signal. That is a reported speech, right? A reported speech event. And then the attitude, no, right, is neutral. So the reporter neither agrees nor disagrees, okay? And the purpose, so what do you think the purpose is? Since this is a new topic, right, they're talking about what happened, right? So in 10, 11, and 12, they talked about the Ministry of Education's decision. Now in 13, you have an event about SNU. So it's a narrative thing, right? So it has to do with the narrative purpose, okay? Because they tell you what happened after the Ministry of Education made the decision, okay? So that's why we say that the purpose is narrative. When you consider the purpose, you have to look at the context as to where it happens and where it occurs and in relation to other things, okay? But it's interesting that what I want to say that is here. In addition, it's interesting because we don't know where, we can guess whether that is a speech event of the SNU official or not. Like in addition, student taking the course for the first time can be put at a disadvantage. I don't know if that's the reporter's insertion of the statement there, or it belongs to the SNU official. We can guess that it might belong to the SNU official, but since it's a new class and there's no signal, right? Just like, unlike the word said here, there's nothing like that. So we can guess that it continues from the previous statement, but we never know whether that's like the reporter's doing or not, right? So it's like a good technique that reporters always use, which is to slip in. If this is their own doing, they can slip in anything after the speech reporting, and it makes it unclear whether it's the wording of the SNU official or it's their own wording. So you have to be careful when you read something like this, okay? So, so far so good. Let's look at number 14. 14 is none, right? There's nothing in 14. Oh, there's one. There's in 14, there's one thing here. Announced on Hankuk Day, Hankuk University of Foreign Studies announced on February 4th that it will no longer issue separate report cards for job seeker. This is a new story, right? So it's, it talks about what happened after the Ministries of Education's decision. So the purpose then is clear that it's narrative, okay? Because it's a different event, it has to do with what happened chronologically, right? And then we have indirect speech here, right? Indirect speech. And then the wording that the signal word is announced. And the speaker is Hankuk Day, right? Hankuk University of Foreign Studies. I believe that's it. The attitude is neutral, right? Because it's said or announced. And it makes it like formal too, right? In terms of attitude, formal. Because announce is better than, is more formal than at least say, right? Let's see. So that's it. Number 15. Some school, as Korea said, they will discontinue said, right? So in this case, we have the signal here, right here, and we know that this is an indirect speech reporting. So indirect, and the signal is in the main clause, indirect. And the purpose is, again, same thing, because it has to do with what happened, right, in chronological order as a result of the Ministry of Education's decision. So clear that it's narrative. in purpose. Number 16, did you see anything in 16? Did you see anything? Any reported speech in 16? Here, do you see berated? Berated, what does it mean? It means to scold, right? To scold, to criticize, to rebuke, to reprimand, maybe, to reproach, whatever word you want to use. Okay? To rail against something, to rail against something. So all these words means like, you know, they complain, they scold, they criticize, they rebuke, B-U-K-E, I think. They reprimand, they reproach, they rail against. So you see that, right? But in this case, it's in the subordinate clause, right? The signal word is in the subordinate clause, not main clause anymore. And we don't have the paraphrase, right? We only have the summary version. See? For abolishing the system, we have the summary version. The summary version happens when you don't have the message. You only have what happened. So they berated the school for not doing this and that, but you don't have the wording. What do they say when they berated the school and so on, right? So that's why we say that it's a summary, okay? And the purpose is narrative, right? Now they shift the point of view to students, right? Especially seniors, to students rather than to universities and universities directors and so on. So we have point of view of students. Okay? What else do we have? Number 17, right? The whole thing. Number 17, the whole thing is your reported speech. But in this case, what do we have? Let me see. We have the signaling word here, right? Said, right? We have the signaling word there. So it's in the main clause and is direct speech in the main clause. Direct speech in the main clause. And it's neutral. Before in 16, the attitude is obviously negative, right? Berated, that's negative. Number 17, direct speech, and it's in the main clause, and the source is a 25-year-old senior at a Seoul-based university. Who knows where it is, right? Seoul-based university. There are many, like hundreds of universities here. Anyway, let's see, direct speech, the signaling word is there, it's in the main clause, and the attitude is neutral, and the function, the purpose is because it talks about what the seniors say, right? So in this case, it gives you an example, right? Give you more detail. So what is the purpose here? The purpose is what we call, it's not narrative, but it's supporting function, right? So supporting function, because it supports 16. Because it gives you more detail about what seniors say, right? Number 17, we are done. 18, nothing. What about 19? Do you see any verb of reporting in 19? Even those who accepted the new policy decried the school for changing it without consulting the student. Here we have decry, right? Which means to denounce, to complain, and so on, right? To condemn, to censure, to criticize, and so on. Okay. And again, this is what? This is the signaling word, right? And this is a summary. Because you don't have the actual wording, right? you only have the fact that they complained or they condemned the school for doing that, but you don't have the actual wording. So it's not direct or indirect. When you have direct or indirect, you have the wording, but here you don't have the wording. They just summarize what happened. Okay? And then the attitude is clearly neutral, right? I'm sorry, clearly negative. Okay? And in this case, it's again, for the purpose, it's supporting, because it supports 16. They're talking about students complaining, and then this is another group of students. Even those who accepted the new policy decry the schools and so on. Okay? And then you hear their voice in 20. You hear their voice in 20. We thought it was wrong for the school to unilaterally revise the rules without even asking. Unilaterally meaning like just one side. They should ask the students, not just making the decision by themselves. Okay, so in that case, we in 20 we have direct speech, right? Here, direct speech with said, right? Remember, said as the keyword, as the signaling word, and it's in the main clause, and the attitude is neutral for that one. And the purpose is that it supports 19. So this is maybe the fashion of, or the kind of the strategy of reporters, especially in newspaper. They will have something that they summarize first, or their own statement first, as in number 19, and then they put in voices of other people in order to support the statement. Okay? And they usually select like direct speech in order to support that statement, because it looks like it's real, right? From real people, right? But it's selected anyway. He said, although the union decided that, so in this case, we have, the next one is indirect speech, and you have the said in the main clause. And the purpose is the same, which is narrative, okay? I'm sorry, the purpose is the same, is to support. And then in 21, where is 21? In 21, we have, 21 is easy, right? We have indirect speech, starting with he said. Right? And you can do the rest, right? Meaning it's indirect speech, right? It's indirect, it's neutral, and so on. This is easy. For the purpose, this one is interesting, because if you look at where it is, you have a paragraph that proposes a new point of view. Despite the student union accepting the new policy, he said it's still facing opposition from many, and so on. So that one, the purpose is to undermine the statement, the previous statement, right? So to undermine. So maybe we see like just one or two, okay? And then in 22, that's easy, okay? 22 is direct speech. It's in the main clause with the word said as a signaling word, and it's neutral, right? And the person who says it is Chue. And the purpose is to support 21. So maybe that one is most important of all. And number 23, we have this guy, Professor Yang, as a speaker, said, and then indirect speech, right? So you can fill the details out, but I can talk about the purpose. The purpose here is, again, just like in number 21, is to undermine the previous statement. Because he says that it may not be enough to get rid of the widespread grade laundering. It may not be enough, right? So they're talking about great laundering for so long, and now this guy said no, it's not good. So the purpose is to undermine it, right? Just to slip in that opinion to say that, oh, what they have done is not right or is not going to solve the problem. And then you have 24 and 25 together, meaning they are the words that Professor Chui used. So we have the purpose being to support number 23. Okay? And other things you can do on your own, right? He said companies should take a bigger role. That's indirect speech, right, with the said as the signaling word. And in 25, you have direct speech and so on. So that's not difficult, okay? Maybe the most difficult thing might be the determining or identifying the purpose, okay? So we can stop right now for speech reporting and thought representation. Now we can switch to a new topic, which is modality, okay? And I use the PowerPoint slides. So we'll start modality today, and we'll distinguish between epistemic, same thing, and deontic modality. So that's what we want to do today. And we'll focus on English modals to start with, okay? So what is modality? Modality has to do with modals, but modals are not modality. In other words, so modality, if I were to define it, modality can be defined as expressions. Anything, any expression that allows speakers to indicate varying degrees of certainty. Meaning, as a speaker, you can tell other people how sure you are, how certain you are. So varying degrees, right? So many degrees, different degrees. So you can tell people how sure you are, how certain you are about a certain thing, about a certain fact, or about a certain phenomenon, so on. And the sorts of obligation they attach to their utterances. Meaning you can do two things. You can indicate how certain you are, and you can indicate what type of obligation you want to give to the listener or to the reader. Okay? Obligation meaning things that they have to do or things that they should do. Okay? So two things, certain and obligation, right? So modality can help you do that. And in other words, modality signals the speaker's or writer's assessment, judgment of the truth of a proposition, whether it's true or not. How true is it? Is it highly true? Is it just like moderately true? Is it maybe likely to be true, and so on? And their attitude, like how much they want you to do it, how much you should do it, and so on. So two things. So modality can do two things. Okay? And why do we study modality? Because last one, right? Which is this, and it will go away for good. Until next time. And the reason why we use modality in everyday life is that we don't talk about things as facts all the time, right? We don't talk about facts all the time. We want other people to do something for us. We indicate how likely that statement is. So it's not a fact, because a fact is 100% sure, right? But most of the time, we are not sure. We cannot predict. We don't have like the ability to predict the future, right? For most of us, so we use modality to do that. So especially in legal writing or in legal language that has to do with law, you will have a lot of modality, especially modality that has to do with obligation. You must do this. You must do that. If you don't do this, what will happen, and so on, right? So we use modality all the time. Like if you compare these statements, unicorns never existed. That's a fact. That's a fact without any modality. Okay, that's a fact. Unicorn never existed. But if you compare that with the second and the third, it seems unlikely that unicorns could ever have existed. Unlikely here is one modality expression that tells you that the speaker is not it seems unlikely. It's not 100% sure, but it's unlikely, right? And in the last one, the existence of unicorns must always have been a myth. Must is another modality expression that tells you that the speaker is quite sure. Even though it's not a fact, he is quite sure of that statement. Okay? So without modality, if you take away must, if you take away could or unlikely, you will have just a bare fact. You can see that you could do so many things with just fact, right? I enjoyed Alfred Hitchcock's Family Plot on TV last night, so that's a fact, right? What happened, how I felt. And then you can say, I certainly enjoy. So certainly is a modality expression that tells you the speaker is so sure of the thing. Or I prefer North by Northwest, there's more suspense in it. And if you compare that to I think I prefer, so it's like he's not 100% sure when you say I think. So modality expressions are expressions that not only are modals, right? Not like can, could, may, might, like that, but also include things like adverbs, certainly, or I think as well. Okay? When you think about modality, you should think about a separate category. You should think about a separate category that is outside of the statement. Okay? Like here, from what I have read in the papers, the bus may be late today. Okay? We'll focus on the second part. Okay? Not the first part, because the first part has no modality. The second part has the word may, right? The bus may be late today. When you think about modality, you think of the modality expression here, for example, may, as separate from the statement. So it's like you have may, and then the statement, the bus be late today. Okay? So it's like may here is the attitude word, right? That says that statement, the whole statement, is just a may. It's just a likely event, right? It's a possible event. So that statement is a statement, but this is kind of a category that's outside it. It tells you that that statement is potential, right? It has the potential of that. So it's not like it's in that, but it's outside, and then it's kind of modifying the whole statement. Or here, all the people must pay taxes by the order of the king. So you have must as the modal, as the modality expression, and you have the statement, all people pay taxes. And then must kind of modifies semantically in terms of the meaning, like this statement has to be, is required, and so on. Okay? So that's how we should look at the modality. Okay? So it's something that exists outside of the whole utterance or the whole statement. There are two types of modality, and that's what we will focus on today. The first type is what we call epistemic or epistemic, right? E or A. Epistemic or epistemic. So episteme means knowledge, right, or belief. So this type has to do with the speaker belief, the belief of the speaker or the belief of the writer, his commitment to the truth. How committed is he, right? So it has to do with what he believes, right? So all these things like potentiality, how much potential, right? Possibility, probability, prediction, or certainty. So these categories have to do with the belief, right? How much, how much chance do you think something will happen, and so on. There is for something to happen. Like it may come true someday, right? So in this case, again, you view the modal expression as being a separate category from the statement. So you have may, and then it come true someday. So may here modifies like it come true someday, right? So may say that, you know, this statement is not 100% sure, like that. So when you have the notion of knowledge or lack of knowledge, right? We can say you have knowledge, but if you're not sure, you have lack of knowledge, right? Lack thereof. Belief about probability or usuality, then you have this kind of range, this kind of different ranges of attitude from like very true, like whole true, it's true that I love you, right? Or doubt, some kind of doubt, like it may come true someday, right? and be convinced. So he must be. So there are like many kind of ranges that indicate your attitude. Okay, and all these are like categories that have to do with epistemic modality. Okay, let's see. The key concept underlying, it should be concept, sorry. The key concept underlying, sorry, this should be concept. The key concept underlying epistemic modality is not so much knowledge you have, right? But it's the lack of knowledge, right? Because if you have knowledge, then you have the fact, right? That's knowledge. Knowledge is fact. But if you don't have knowledge, it means you don't have the fact. So basically, how certain you are, that means you don't have the knowledge. So rather than you have knowledge, right? So that's the point of this slide. What is your obligation to do something? Responsibility, command, intention, permission, and also this one is kind of separate, ability. So if you want to mark that as something that's not has to do with necessary. Some people categorize ability, like I can play the piano, the ability as dynamic modality. So they have 3 categories. But in this class, we'll just put it under deontic, okay? With the awareness that some other people might have a different category for it. So permission, anything that has to do with permission, you may go, you may leave now, and responsibility, command, duty, and so on, desire. All of these have to do with deontic modality. So in other words, epistemic has to do with how sure you are, the belief. But this has to do with what's necessary, right? So it tends to be subject-oriented, meaning it tends to be directed towards the subject of the sentence. You may leave the table is directed to you, right? To the listener, in other words. So it's directed to the subject of the sentence here. And again, you have a range of attitudes that come with deontic modality. Directive, you must read this noun, so it's a command, right? It's a command. Or permission. Permission is kind of lower level after directive, right? You may leave now. You can play the piano, or ability. And the last one is prohibition, ability, right? You cannot go, right? And so these are sources of what can issue deontic modality, like internal oneself, you're telling yourself, external norms or laws that could impose some kind of obligation on you. When you look at modality expressions, one source in English that's so important is modals or modal verbs, okay? So everyone knows what modals are, right? Words like, let me switch to this. Words like modals, what are modals? Words that modals do not change, right? Modal do not change their tenses, right? For example, can, could, may, might, will, would, that kind of thing, right? Ought to, GST to, should, shall, and so on, right? They don't have tenses, right? Like you cannot say he cans or something, right? It would be funny. Or he mays, you cannot do that, right? Or he can plus the ed, you cannot do that, right? And you know all this, right? Can plus all these verbs plus an infinitive verb, right? He can do, not he can does or something, right? So it's easy. One of the interesting thing is it doesn't have, a modal doesn't have tense. So could is not really the past tense of can, might is not really the past tense of may, would is not really a past tense of will, and so on. Maybe there's an exception, like could be a past tense of can, like I could swim when I was 5. Maybe that's the only exception I can say, that it indicates the ability in the past like that, which may not be true at present. But other things, might is not the past tense of may for sure, right? When you say in reported speech, right, may can change to might, we know that. But that is not the past tense, it's just the form, right? Because you change the tense of the anchor. So might change the form too, but it's not the past tense. It's still the reported speech. So there's only one exception, okay? And you, the reason why the form changes like could, might, would, is that they indicate less of modality effect, right? So, for example, would is not as strong as will. In particular, you would use would when you talk about hypothetical things, right? If I were you, I would do this and that, right? I would, right? So it means you have less of modality effects, whether it's epistemic or deontic meaning or effect. Okay? So that's one source of modality. And what is important is that a modal like can or could indicate both types of meanings, including epistemic or deontic. Okay? So let's come back to the slide here. So we talked about that. And let me skip. I don't want to spend so much time on the form because we know this already, right? How to make a negative sentence of modals. Like he must not, just put not after the modal, right? Everyone knows this. Or you could do it, it's obligatory that you not pay the fine. So you have not there. Or sometimes you have not in the expression, in the modal expression rather than in here, okay? So I don't want to spend so much time on that because it's easy. Now, what I want to focus on is the fact that a modal can have both types of meaning, epistemic or deontic. Like if you look at this one, they must be married. They must be married or they have to be married. Both types of meaning are possible. If it's here, the speaker guesses, okay? The speaker guesses or surmises, perhaps from appearances that the couple is married, then it's epistemic reading. They must be. So I'm sure that they are married, meaning it's epistemic, right? They must be married for sure, like that. So it's epistemic. Or it could be deontic, like a person can tell them, you guys, you must be married, you must get married, and so on, right? So in order to apply for citizenship or whatever, so a modal could have both meanings depending on the context, okay? So all modals can have both meanings. Like this one, a student whose file of essays is incomplete may not be considered for appeal. So appeal is like, change of opinion of some sort, okay? Like change of grade or something like that. A statement of outcome, it could be epistemic, right? Or if it's a statement of impermissible course of action, you cannot do that. You are not allowed to do that. Then it's deontic, okay? So may here could be either epistemic or deontic, okay? Bill won't go. Bill won't go. In this case, again, because every modal can have both meanings, right? So you can have both the epistemic and deontic reading depending on what you want to say or the speaker intention. So epistemic reading, so epistemic has to do with knowledge or how sure you are, right? So Bill won't go, it means that the speaker guesses that it's unlikely that Bill will go, okay? So it's unlikely, the speaker guesses that it's unlikely that Bill will go, that Bill will show up. It's unlikely, that's what he guesses. But if it's the deontic reading, you could say Bill won't go, meaning Bill doesn't intend to go, right? Bill doesn't have the intention, the desire to go, okay? So remember, the ontic has to do with permission, desire, intention, ability, or obligation. So Bill won't go, meaning Bill doesn't have the intention to go, which is the ontic reading. So both readings are possible depending on the context, okay? And all languages have the same, kind of more or less the same range of modality, right? So in English, for example, can could also indicate many things, right? Ability, for example, right? I can play the piano, which is, in this case, is the ontic, right? Or it could indicate that you are not sure about something. The weather can get up to 40 degrees in the summer, right? So that's epistemic, right? Guess or probability, like the weather can get up to 40 degrees in Seoul, whatever, okay? Or if not ability, you can indicate permission, right? For example, you can leave now. Right? You can leave now, right? That's permission, right? Permission is the ontic because it's permission. How do you say permission in Korean? Or can, the verb to can. No, not the verb to can, the modal can. What is the verb? The modal can in Korean. How do you say it? This, right? 을 수 있다, right? Or 을 수 없다. Verb plus this, or 수 없다, right? 할? That's to do something, right? 할 수 없다. So when you say 할 수 없다 or 할 수 있다, right? So this is the 을 or 를 here, and the verb is 하다, right? That's how non-native speakers are taught. So you just have the verb like 하다, and you cut this off. So we have to begin with the infinitive. We cut this off, and then we plus 을른, depending on whether there's 받침 or not, and then we plus 수 or 수가, and then 있다, 없다, and you have to conjugate this. 있어요, 있습니다, whatever. So it's like, whenever I want to say something, I have to start out with this, and then put in all these things here, which is difficult, right? Now you understand me. So can you do the same thing with all these English sentences? You can leave now. For example, 지금 떠나다. So 떠날 수 있어, like that, right? Can you do that? You can leave now, for example, right? Difficult, right? You can speak English well, right? 영어를 and then 말할 수 있어. 잘 말할 수 있어, right? So you can do that. Both the ontic and epistemic, right? Both the ontic and epistemic. What about, let's see, may. How do you say may? How do you say may in Korean? This is what I was taught. may. Permission. 야, 도, 되다. 도, 돼요. So you have to have the verb plus one of these stupid vowels, and then 도, 돼요, right? After class, can we meet, right? 수업 후에는 만나도 돼요, right? Like that. So you may do this and that, right? So it's the same thing, right, in Korean. And then what about must? How do you say must? 야, 해요, right? Like same thing. And then 하다, right? And then 해요. But must is like, can you, in English, when we say must, we can say the epistemic meaning of must. For example, Junsong must have a lot of money because without money, he is nothing, according to Kyungmo. So from that, we can imply that it is implied that he must have a lot of money because without money, he's nothing. So can you use aoya hada here? Tony money, like that. Jun Song Nun, Tony money, like Tony money. And then, can you that? Can you that? You cannot, right? You cannot use aoya hada here. So maybe in Korean, that expression of must doesn't have the epistemic reading. So this is epistemic. Okay. But if you want to say Junsong must study harder rather than go clubbing, right? You can use aoya heyo, right? 공부는 열심히 and then 해야 해요, right? 해야 해요, and so on. So must in Korean, 해야 해요. That's only the epistemic reading and not the deontic reading. So thank you for being our source of example here. So we'll come back to this on Monday. So today, for the rest of the time, we'll practice recognizing epistemic or deontic. Okay? So I'll give you guys 10 minutes or 15 minutes, maybe 10, to decide, to identify whether these examples have deontic or epistemic reading, right? In number one, and assuming, because they are taken out of context, so assuming that we are talking about the basic meaning, okay, the kind of the common meaning. Like, A, I must be getting sick. I must be getting sick. That's clearly epistemic, right? It's a guess. So I'm sure, or something like that. I'm pretty sure that I'm being sick, right? I'm getting sick. I'm pretty sure. So it has to do with your guess. So it's epistemic, right? You're not going to tell yourself, right? I must be sick. I must get sick. So deontic is not really possible. It's possible theoretically, but in terms of like common use, deontic is not possible with must here, right? And then you may be pregnant, right? Are you telling people, hey, you may get pregnant like that? No. So you may be pregnant is like more likely to be epistemic, right? It's likely to be epistemic. Or if you can imagine a situation when your parents tell you, or when your husband tell you, right? Hey, now you can get pregnant. You are allowed to be pregnant, like your parents can tell you, right? So in that case, it's deontic. It's possible, but not likely, right? Since it's like maybe personal decision. So can you do that for the rest? I'll give you some time. And some of these can be ambiguous, meaning it could be both, depending on the situation. So maybe you're done. Let's look at number C, right? So nitric acid will dissolve zinc. Nitric acid will dissolve zinc. Is it epistemic or is it deontic? Are you telling the obligation, nitric acid, hey, you need to do this? Or are you telling that? Or are you talking about your knowledge that this is what it does or what it will do? So if it has to do with your knowledge, right? So it's then epistemic. Like you can paraphrase it with, it's certain that the acid dissolves zinc and so on, right? You can paraphrase it. So it's certain, then it has to do with knowledge for sure, right? Number D, dog. John must leave now, right? John must leave now. So in this case, you're telling John, right, what he has to do or what he must do. So it's deontic, right? is John's obligation to leave now, right? So deontic. What about number E? He can miss class. What might be the common reading, the common interpretation? You're not telling me it's ability, right? He can't, everyone can, everyone has the ability to miss class. So it's not very common to say it like that. But here, he can miss class is like permission, right? You can say it, you can paraphrase it with may, right? So he may miss class. In other words, like if I tell Al Kyung-wan, you may talk to your mom on the phone. He's on chat line all the time, okay? So you may talk with your mom in my class because I know you love your mom so much. You can talk to your mom all the time. So can here is may. So is permission, so it's deontic, right? So it's permission. In many cases, English-speaking people usually use can to say permission, okay? To offer permission. Number F, you could clean your room. Again, it's not ability in the past, okay? It's not usual that we would talk about our ability to clean the room in the past, right? So in this case, it's like deontic. Meaning like you are obliged to clean your room. I want you to do so, and so on. It's a polite way of telling someone to do something, okay? You could do that. Like, could you clean the room, and so on. It's not asking about whether you can or you cannot, right? It's like indirect request, okay? It's like indirect, maybe command, okay? So it's deontic in that sense. Number G, he must have passed the examination. What is it? He must have passed the examination. This has to do with past event, right? When you have the perfect have after the modal must. So is it deontic or epistemic? Epistemic in the sense that it's epistemic when you have the reading like, I think or I'm sure. I think or I'm sure he passed the exam, right? Like that. So in that case, it's epistemic. Now, can it be deontic too? Like you're telling him to do that to pass the exam. Can it be that? Possible, right? Like you must have passed the exam before graduation. You must have passed the exam. You must have achieved the A grade or B grade on the exam before graduation. So it can be used like that too. Okay? So both, right? So if you have like, in order to graduate, that would make it more clear, right? The context would make it more clear that in order to graduate, he must have passed the exam first, okay? Or he must pass the exam first if just you don't want to talk about the perfect kind of thing. Or you can paraphrase it like, it's necessary that he pass the exam. He have passed the exam and so on. Number H, you might have fallen. Might here indicates possibility, right? So it's clearly epistemic. It's possible you could have fallen and so on. So it's epistemic because it has to do with probability. Number I, cocktail parties can be boring. Epistemic or deontic? Epistemic, right? So you're saying it's likely that it's possible that cocktail parties are boring and so on, okay? So it's epistemic. She could be discouraged. What might be the sense? She could be discouraged. If you compare this to number F, you could clean your room. So we say that number F is like indirect command or indirect request, right? You could clean your room to say it politely, right? same here. She could be discouraged, meaning we can do something. We should do something to discourage her. So in that sense, it's deontic. We should do something, right? Obligation to discourage her. So it's deontic in that sense. But if it's just guessing, well, she could be discouraged. It's possible, for example, it's likely. So in that case, it would be epistemic. It's possible that she's discouraged like that. Okay? Now, number K, I will marry her. Epistemic or deontic? It depends on what you mean, right? If it's your intention, like intention, then it's deontic, right? It's my intention to marry her. That's deontic. But if it's just prediction, it's highly likely that I will prediction, then it's epistemic. It's likely that I marry her, that's epistemic, right? So will can indicate both the intention and also the prediction. So that's why when we use will, for example, like it will rain, something like that, could be prediction. Okay? Could be prediction, right? It will get cold tonight. It will get cold like that. So it's prediction. And also it could be intention, right? So I'll go to see you. So that's intention. So will could be two things, okay? Either prediction or either intention. And will is different from to be going to, right? You guys know that, right? I'm trying to find another different color. So to be going to could be used to indicate both to, but differently. If you use to be going to, like it's going to rain, instead of it will rain, it's going to rain. It's prediction too, but it's the prediction that's based on kind of evidence, some kind of evidence. You must have some evidence. Like if you look out of the window and you see clouds, right? Dark clouds, you'll say this is going to rain because you have some kind of evidence, either present evidence or past evidence. You must have some kind of evidence because going to is more specific than will. Okay? Prediction without evidence and prediction with evidence. And also, so that's the first case, right? The second case is when you can use will with intention, and you could use going to with intention. I'm going to marry you, for example. In this case, it's intention, but how is it different from the intention of will? Well, it's different because this is what we call planned. If it's planned intention, then you use I'm going to. But if it's just intention that you don't have like a plan for in advance, you don't think about it before, you just make a decision right then. Oh, I'll go and see you without planning before, right? You use will. But if you have some kind of planning like marriage, like you have to have some kind of planning, right, for that thing. So you use going to. So both could be intention or prediction, but with evidence or without evidence, and planned or unplanned. So you can use them appropriately. Since we are out of time, we'll come back, and can you finish this off? And we'll come back on Wednesday, right? To, no, not yet, but You should be crying.